Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of She Talks Business. I am back here with Cass Bald as we continue on this series that is all about strategic marketing for your business. Our goal is to set you up for success in the last quarter of the year and to maybe kickstart your new year with stronger marketing principles. If you've been following along, you'll know that the first episode we recorded was all about branding, positioning, and messaging. The second episode that we recorded was all things website related, and this one is going to be all about thought leadership and content marketing. So we've got some great stuff to share with you today. Cass, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Excited to talk about thought leadership. And I think maybe the best way to get started is let's tell people what thought leadership even is. I've noticed that when clients come to us for help, this is one of the biggest areas that they could improve.
Yeah, and it's a really great question because sometimes I think people think that just because they write content, they're a thought leader. And I think that being a thought leader means that you are known for a specific thing. So if I look at Alan Weiss as an example, he's been writing about consulting for many, many years. If you look at, Malcolm Gladwell, right? Like he writes these books. He's considered to be a thought leader. I think it's really important that you think about what you write through the lens of, are you being a thought leader? So thought leaders are leaders that think differently. They're leaders that capture their thinking in different types of formats, whether, writing, could be video, audio, whatever, but they are consistent and diligent about capturing their thinking. Whereas somebody who just creates content might just create random content. So if you look at a mommy blogger who is posting recipes every single day or every single week, is she a thought leader? Probably not. She is a content creator, but she's not necessarily a thought leader. Now, if she was a mommy blogger who specialized in carnivore eating, and all she ever wrote about was how to make recipes that are high in protein, and she was focused on the health benefits of eating a carnivore-based diet, then she might be a thought leader. So what's her name? Melissa, I can't even think of her last name, who is the founder of Whole30. She is a thought leader. She reinvented kind of the industry in terms of what it meant to eat whole foods when she invented the Whole30 protocol. So when you think about your business and how you create content, I think it's important that you know what you want to be a thought leader on. And, when I'm advising people, we're advising people, we typically tell them that they should have 3 to 5 pillars that they focus on. So if I look at my business, I tend to talk a lot about business strategy, marketing, and money, because I'm really good at numbers and I love helping people build wealth. I'm really good at business strategy and I understand how to use marketing to increase sales and profit. So those are the areas that really fall under my thought leadership. So it's important that people define what those are when they're starting out.
I'd also say that just as some people are creating content that is not thought leadership content, there's some people out there who are creating thought leadership content and just not nearly enough of it. So you've likely heard the 80-20 principle related to content marketing before, that you should be promoting, or you should be posting or publishing 80% thought leadership content or value-based content, and only 20% of what you publish should be promotional. And so I think that's a really important concept to be thinking about in your thought leadership as well.
Sure. Before we dive into formats, there's one more thing that I want to say about thought leadership. If you're listening and you aspire to be a thought leader, I want you to ask yourself who you consider to be a thought leader that you would like to emulate. And then what I want you to do is I want you to go look at their website, and I want you to go look at their social channels, and I want you to figure out how much thought leadership are they creating. How often are they blogging? How often are they sending out a newsletter? How often are they creating video content? How often are they publishing podcasts? And If you aspire to be like them, then I want you to ask yourself whether or not the frequency at which you produce thought leadership is remotely close to what they're doing. Because I think sometimes we think thought leadership can just be, this one and done thing. And I think we talked about this a little bit. I don't know if it's on the last episode or not, but I liken every new piece of content as a piece of paper. And the more content you create, the bigger the stack becomes. And the bigger the stack becomes, the higher your positioning gets, because you're literally standing on top of your body of work. And too many people, just like, did you know that there's a stat, something like 90% of people who start a podcast never get past episode 5. And I think the remaining 90% never get past episode 100. It's the same thing when it comes to thought leadership. Most people are all show and no go. They don't actually do the work. So I would encourage people to look for some examples of what success looks like for you to emulate. All right, let's dive into formats, Cass. Why don't you tell me what your favorite formats are when it comes to consuming content?
So I'm a video girl. Specifically, I love Reels, I love TikToks, and I love YouTube. So that is my top consumed type of content. And it might also be my top recommended type of content in today's marketing landscape. And that changes all the time. But as of right now, as of today, YouTube is one of the top platforms for educating, and therefore one of the top platforms for sharing thought leadership. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to create video. It's a lot easier than people make it out to be, especially on TikTok or Instagram Reels. Authenticity is better than perfection. And showing up and being real and just recording your thoughts and your feelings and your experiences every day and showcasing that leadership very naturally, that is what connects to people. So it's not as hard as people make it out to seem. You don't have to be in a studio every single time you want to record video content. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to YouTube, if you are recording longer form content, you can easily splice that into dozens of Reels or TikToks or even YouTube Shorts. So video creation is not as hard as everyone makes it out to be.
That's interesting. My favorite way to consume content, which will be no surprise to those of you listening, is written content. I like to read content. I also like to listen. So I like to listen to podcasts, but reading articles and reading books are definitely the formats that I like the most. I think because when I'm reading, my brain triggers insights differently than when I'm watching a video and or listening to content. I'm also a big fan of process visuals. I always say to people, can you imagine if you went to IKEA and they gave you the instructions in step-by-step writing and they didn't show you any pictures of what's inside the box, how hard it would be to actually build what you're building. And so when I think about process visuals, I feel like process visuals are a really, really great way to shortcut understanding for people. And process visuals can be trademarked. You can name a visual something and it can become, a piece of IP that you own, which is another great way to develop your thought leadership, is to actually have some of these things that are trademarked and owned by you. On the video side, it's interesting. For me, I watch videos more for entertainment than I do education. And I love that we don't approach videos the same way, because I think that it just demonstrates that people think differently. So some people like to consume that way and other people do not. I know my husband consumes tons of videos. Anytime he wants to learn how to figure out how to do something, he's on YouTube searching for the information that he wants. Whereas I'm reading the step-by-steps of what it is that I need to find. So it neither way is right or wrong. It's just different. And if you are someone who wants to be a thought leader, I think it's really important for you to be mindful of the fact that you will have people who follow your work that are just like Cass and I, one who really likes to read and one who really likes to watch. And are you creating content to serve both people? That's what matters.
For those of you listening who are thinking about creating more thought leadership content, I think it might be helpful for us to give more specific examples of what each written, video, audio, and visual content could be, because there's a lot more variety out there than you might think. Written content isn't just blogging. It could be a newsletter. It could be social media content. It's the words written on your website. It could be PDF resources. It could be a book or a skinny book. There are tons of ways to share thought leadership in written content. Mm-hmm. And the same goes for video. So I've talked about long form video on YouTube. I've talked about short form video as Reels, TikToks, or Shorts. But this could also be webinars or going live on LinkedIn, for example, as well. Audio, not just podcasts. What's the X Spaces? Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. Twitter Spaces?
Spaces.
I've never tuned into Spaces.
Oh my God, they're the best. I listen to Spaces often when I fall asleep at night instead of podcasts. They have some really, really, really great conversations on there.
So is it a podcast but live? Is it a live stream audio?
No, it's more like, what did it used to be called? Clubhouse. So you have somebody who is hosting a room, a space, and people come in, and some of them are speakers and some of them are listeners. And when you're a listener, you can raise your hand and request to speak. And typically they're having conversations about a variety of topics. I mean, right now there's a lot of conversation happening around politics, but you would see conversation. If you look at the news, anything that is trending in the media, people are tending to have conversations about. If you think about things like weight loss or marketing, like high level topics that people are interested in, there are people that are hosting spaces on those things. And so I think that the interesting thing about spaces is you could be hosting a space as a host to demonstrate your thought leadership, and you could be teaching in that space just like you would teach on a Zoom webinar, but you don't see people, you just hear them. And it's really interesting. I mean, when Elon Musk interviewed former President Trump, there were over 1 million people trying to access the space to listen to that conversation. And there were so many people trying to get into the space that the space kind of crashed for a bit. It was really hard for people to get in. But that just gives you an example of how big a space can become where people are all listening. So it's pretty cool.
And then I guess audiograms, if we're talking about types of audio content, audiograms used to be really popular. I don't think they're as popular anymore, but there's still an option. That's when you take the audio from a video or a podcast clip and you just put it on top of a graphic. And then visual, we talked about process visuals. So this could be on your website. It could be on a PDF resource. This could even just be graphics that you share on social media. Mm-hmm. Anything else for visuals? Any other visual content types that you can think of?
No, I don't think so. Like when I think of visuals for thought leadership, I really think process visuals that kind of map out ideas. I don't think visuals in terms of pictures of yourself or pictures of, landscapes and things like that are thought leadership. And I think we have to really, we have to define what thought leadership is, because a lot of the things that we've talked about could also just be content marketing. And I think there's a difference between content marketing and thought leadership. So if I jump on Instagram and I film a 60-second reel and I'm just riffing about something, I don't consider that real thought leadership. I consider that content marketing. I look at thought leadership as the body of work that really resides on your website. And the only exclusion to that, I would say, is YouTube videos, because you can't really host videos on your own website. You would host them on YouTube and embed them on your website. And the reason I make that distinction, Cass, is I know people who have put a whole lot of effort into a social media channel like Instagram or Facebook or even LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden something goes sideways with their account and they get hacked and they lose everything. And so when you are creating thought leadership, I think you want to own your thought leadership, and you can distribute it through other channels. But I think that true thought leadership is something that goes on your website. And it's not to say that your website can't get hacked, but if you're a smart marketer, you are backing your website up on a daily basis. And so you will be able to recover that content if something goes wrong. Whereas if one of the social networks goes down, you don't have the option of recovering that content. So I think it's important that you are protective of the thought leadership that you're creating.
Yeah, that's a totally fair point. I agree with that. And there's exceptions to the rule. A book is still thought leadership, for example. But yes, there is certainly a distinction between thought leadership and content marketing. Content marketing is like the vessel for sharing your thought leadership, but your thought leadership is yours.
Right. Exactly. I feel like thought leadership is deeper, whereas content marketing could be cutesy and fun. So when I post a picture of my dogs, for example, or I post a picture of I've gone out for dinner and I'm sharing something like that on social media, to me, that's content marketing. If I take that story and I turn it into a blog post or a long form video and I'm sharing lessons that are aligned with my area of expertise, then to me, it becomes more thought leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's talk frequency. What is the cadence? What is the consistency? And why does it matter?
So I think that when you are trying to build a business, people don't know who you are. They don't know what you know. They don't know what you stand for. They don't know what your thought leadership is. And it's really important that you put as much information out there as possible. So I spoke earlier about finding someone that you would like to emulate who is successful. I know people who publish on their blog on a daily basis. I know people who publish on their blog on a monthly basis, and I know people who publish on a weekly basis. I think you have to ask yourself where you're at in your business. I look at thought leadership almost like the gas pedal in your car. The faster you want to go, the more you need to produce. And so if you're happy with things the way they are, then that's fine and dandy. Continue to do it the way it is. But if you wish that you had more inbound leads, more traffic to your website, and were more known for your thought leadership, then chances are you need to increase the frequency of the content that you're posting. I usually recommend to people at minimum that they're producing 2 pieces of content a week. So I blog every week and I do this podcast every week. And we mail the blog and we mail the podcast via my newsletter every week, and then we distribute it on social media. In a perfect world, I would probably blog a couple times a week. You know, when I first started this business, I was blogging once a week and I was doing videos twice a week. I was doing 2 shop talk videos every single week. And I was getting a ton of reach. That really helped me build my business. So I think it depends on where you're at with your business in terms of in terms of frequency. And I think in terms of consistency, you know, I got to tell you, when there's somebody that I follow and I really like their work and they skip a week, I miss that. Like when I go to Tim Ferriss's podcast, which I listen to every single week, and there's a week where he doesn't have something new, I'm disappointed. And so you want to be consistent in whatever frequency you commit to so that the people that listen, watch, or read your work know that you're reliable and that you will show up when you say you will show up. What are your thoughts? What do you think people should do?
Sometimes you say done is better than perfect. And one of the biggest barriers for people to actually have appropriate cadence for where they're at in their business and barriers to them being consistent is they get so hung up on getting it perfect. They're afraid to publish a blog or send a newsletter unless it's the most beautifully written thing they've ever read. And if you wait for it to be absolutely perfect, you will never be able to publish anything.
I agree 100%.
So I think that it is also important to give yourself grace and know that getting in front of people is better than never being seen at all.
You need to do the reps in order to perfect the skill. And so you can't hire somebody to do your push-ups for you. And you can't learn to be a great writer, for example, without writing. You can't become a great podcast interviewer without doing several interviews. You can't become comfortable on camera if you never turn the video on. So I think the reps are important, and that's how you actually develop mastery, is through repetition.
And I would also add that you can't become a great writer unless you are a consumer of writing. You can't become a great video recorder unless you are a consumer of video. It's really helpful to look to the people who are doing those things well, read books, watch other people's videos, listen to podcasts, and that will help you become better at it as well.
100%. The other thing I would say on the whole idea of being consistent is sometimes you need to give yourself a bit of grace and take a break. And so in times like that, don't be afraid to repurpose content that you have. Remember, every piece of content is like you're adding a stack of paper to a pile. There's going to be paper at the bottom of the pile and in the middle of the pile that not everyone has seen before. And so if you need to take a break, you need to take a week off, or you want to go on vacation for 2 weeks, don't be afraid to repurpose or reuse something that you've used before. Just put some framing together and introduce it in a way that is slightly different, and that will actually buy you a little bit of time when you need to take a break.
Or when repurposing or when writing, write with the intention of someday repurposing. While it's helpful to create thought leadership content about trending topics or things that are going on in the world right now, it's also helpful to write evergreen pieces of content so that on a rainy day when you're not feeling good or something happens and you can't produce your regular content, you have something that you know you can go back to, and it's not as complicated as having to write new framing for it. It's something that you can just pull and reuse.
100%. So let's talk about follow through. What are some ways that people can actually do this? How can people go from I don't know what to say to creating a strategy or a plan so that they always have something to say?
I find there's always two common objections to writing content. And it's either I don't have time or I don't know what to say. So let's talk about the first objection. I don't have time. Well, if it's important to you, you have to prioritize it and you have to make time for it. I'm sure if you genuinely look at your day, there is 10 to 15 minutes that you can set aside to write.
No, I think people overestimate how much time it takes. I know that I heard Taki Moore say once that he gives himself 15 minutes to write a blog post, and he just writes. And the next day, he gives himself another 15 minutes to edit that same post and make it better. And so that's really 2 15-minute sittings to be able to write something that is useful and valuable for others. If you get into the habit of setting a timer like that and forcing yourself to do it, I think you'll be amazed at what you come up with.
And don't be tied to the outcome for that first 15 minutes. Just focus on writing a crummy first draft. And that's when the second 15 minutes comes into play and you can make it better. But getting the ideas on the paper is sometimes the hardest part.
Yeah. And I would add, don't edit while you write. Just write. Make writing and editing a 2-step process. Too many people get caught up in analysis paralysis because they're trying to edit everything that they write. And when you write the whole thing and then you step back and then you read it with a fresh set of eyes, it becomes a lot easier to edit and make it better.
Oh, and you can also go and listen to Lisa's previous season on AI, because I know for a fact she gave you all the tips on how to create content using AI. So if you really feel like you don't have time, go listen to that and use AI, because it will save you so much time.
Yeah, it'll help you get started for sure.
So the second objection was, I don't know what to say. And I think there's 3 people who I look to, who I know personally, who do a great job of creating content. One is you, Lisa. So what is your technique to produce content every single week?
There's two things that I like to do. I always kind of default back to the content matrix. So my content matrix, if you think about it across the top, I've got the topics that I talk about. So business strategy, marketing, and money. And then down the side, I've got a list of prompts. So I've got myths, I've got best practices, I've got common mistakes, I've got resources, I've got research, I've got stories. Like I've got these little categories that I could draw into, and that makes my brain start to kind of connect the dots. Like if somebody said to me, what are 5 myths people believe about marketing? I could write about that. What are 5 mistakes people make on social media? I could write about that. So it helps me to kind of have a direction. The second thing that is helpful for me is just thinking about my own life experiences and how one of the things that I think I'm really good at, and I don't know how I learned this, it might just be something I'm naturally good at, is I seem to be able to turn a story into a metaphor that ties to a business lesson. And so whenever I think of a story and I know that I can use that story and tie it to a business lesson in some way, then it's really easy for me to write about it. So those are the two kind of hacks that are my personal favorites.
The second person who I admire with regard to their ability to create content consistently is Alan Weiss. I know we've talked about him many times on this podcast already, but Alan produces more content than I've ever seen anyone produce in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And what he does, and I heard him share this on, I think either on his social media or in a
probably
webinar
on an interview with me.
Probably on an interview with you, yeah. He carries around a little notebook in his pocket sometimes. And throughout the day, as something happens that he thinks he could write about, and you would be surprised how many things actually happen in your day that you could turn into lessons for your audience, he just pulls out the notebook and jots it down. So he's out buying his morning coffee, and I know this is actually your story, Lisa, but I like it. So you're out buying your morning coffee, and you actually bought coffee at the same place 3 days in a row. But the third day, it costs you 50 cents more.
$1 more.
$1 more. And so you turned that into a business lesson because there's a lesson to be had there. And all you have to do is take note of those little things that happen to you throughout your day. And then at the end of the day or the end of the week, you have a full notebook of things that you can write about. And you don't have to strain and try and figure it out because you've already done the brainstorming step of the process.
Yeah, Alan always asks himself the question, how could I use this? That's the question that he asks himself. And you don't even need a notebook. You just need a piece of paper, or you need the notepad on your iPhone, and you can jot them down in there. And it's like little things that you want to remember that you could easily write about. And you don't need to write, an entire sentence. You can just write a couple keywords that bring you back to that exact moment. Super useful. And the other thing about Alan is also not attached to the opinions of others. And so he creates content fast. A lot of his written content is very short, and he would rather be prolific and publish all the time than, agonize over whether something is good enough and only publish once in a while.
It's a great example given the whole topic of this episode is thought leadership. Alan is somebody who shares thought leadership every single day. Mm-hmm.
One other thing he does when it comes to video and even sometimes podcasts is he batch creates. So when the writing on the wall is recorded, his videographer comes to his house and he will record 8 to 10 episodes. And on a weekly basis, when he records A Minute with Alan, he records 5 at a time and sends them all to our team to be published. So, he's not waiting for something to come to him every day. He is proactively getting 5, sometimes 10 ahead so that there's always enough content ready to be shared at any given time.
Right. And then the very last person that I wanted to talk about in terms of following through on the content creation is Michelle Weger, who has been a podcast guest on She Talks Business many times, but also very recently. And while she's not new to creating content, the content I specifically want to highlight right now is her new book. And Michelle didn't write this book the way most people write a book. She didn't do it sitting at a desk and slaving over a Google document, trying to write it from start to finish. Instead, throughout her day, as she would think of something, a story or a lesson or a little tidbit that she wanted to include, she voice recorded those thoughts on the spot until she had enough that she could transcribe and have AI help her turn into a book outline. And then she was able to easily produce the rest of the content from there. But that helped her write and publish her book in under a year, I'm pretty sure. Is that accurate? Under a year.
I think it was even under 6 months. I think it took her a couple of months. The other thing that she did that you may not know is she structured her book from a keynote that she had done. And so she knew that she wanted to use the keynote as like the framework for the book that she was writing. And so it became easier for her to do those audio messages and stories because she knew what things she needed to fill in for each section of the keynote, which is, again, really, really smart. She's repurposing a keynote that she's given that was very well received, and she's now expanding that keynote into a book so that she can reach more people.
So that technique doesn't have to be used for creating a book. It could be used for creating any type of content. It could be, you can record on your phone at any time, and you can even download any of the AI apps onto your phone, and you can record directly in the app, which does the transcribing for you. You don't just have to voice note it and then upload it to a tool and then upload it to, you don't have to make it so complicated. You can just record right in the AI app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Those are great examples. Really, really great examples. So some other things that I think people can do is, I think sometimes we just need to mine a little bit. And what I mean by that is, if you're in the service industry, like you are a coach or a consultant and you are in a service-based industry, you probably have noticed that a lot of your customers have the same issues. And so one of the things that you can do to look for things to write about is go back through the notes from meetings that you had with your clients the previous week. Go back through your text messages or group chats where you've had conversations with people and look at some of the common questions, challenges, problems that people have brought to you and ask yourself, is there something that you could write about that would help multiple people? Because if you're giving somebody advice right now on a problem or a situation that they have, why can't you turn that advice into some type of a piece of content or a piece of thought leadership that allows your advice to be used in different ways? Now, I do think that you should be a little bit sensitive to anonymity. You don't want your customers to feel like you just got off the phone with them and you wrote an article about them. I know I had that happen one time. I wrote something and somebody actually called me out for writing about them. I'm like, that wasn't about you. I wrote that 3 weeks ago. But I think you want to make sure that if you were talking to a woman, you might want to say it was a man. And if you were talking to them yesterday, you might want to say this happened last month. You want to do things to protect people's feelings when you do that. Or maybe you want to write it and you want to schedule it for a few weeks later so that it's not quite so close to when it happened.
Great point. So to close us out, let's go back to thought leadership one last time. I want to highlight how important it is. And I'm going to use your phrase or a phrase that you've used. I don't know if this is officially your phrase. People will want to do business with you if they know, like, and trust you. Mm-hmm. And in order for them to know, like, and trust you, you need to be sharing your thought leadership. If you want them to know you, you need to be getting in front of them. If you want them to like you and trust you, you need to be sharing good stuff that positions you as the leader, the person that can help them.
100%. The best way to get known is to put content marketing out into the internet and let it lead back to you. The best way to build trust is to post content that is actually super valuable for people. And the best way to be likable is to be friendly. And I think that, I know we're talking about thought leadership here, but I do think that sometimes people underestimate the value of a good personality. So don't forget, your personality comes into play in all of these things. You could be a prolific thought leader and a real ass. Don't be that person. Be a prolific thought leader and be somebody that people like and can depend on and feel good around too. All right. Well, this was a really rich episode. I mean, thought leadership is something we talk to our clients about all the time. And I hope those of you listening got some great ideas. Here's another suggestion that I'm just going to wrap up with. I've hosted a number of different kind of mastermind retreats and workshops and things over the years. And one exercise that I have done, I actually even did this exercise at the Trust with 7 and 8 figure business owners, and people raved about it, is I put people into pairs and I get someone else to tell them what they think they should create thought leadership on. Sometimes you're too close to it to even come up with the ideas that other people would like to hear. So find a partner, a thinking partner, and tell them what your business is all about and ask them to tell you what their ideas are for your thought leadership. And then you do the same for them. And you'll be amazed at the idea generation that comes out of those conversations. All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Cass, for being a great co-host. It was great to see you here. I just saw on the camera a little bit of cat hair, so I know you have a cat on your lap. And for those of you watching the video, I have a dog on mine. Hey, Peach. Faith, look. Who's that? I'm waiting for... Well, that's Sunshine jealous. Hey, Peach.
She literally just jumped on my lap in this last minute here, but I was like, oh, let me try and hide her right now.
That's so funny. That's the beauty of working from home. We get to take care of our beloved fur babies. All right. Thanks for listening. If you have any tips or suggestions on great ways to create content, I'd love to hear from you. I know that even though I'm sharing all these, sometimes I too fall into the I don't know what to say. And so don't be afraid to share your hacks with me. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening to this episode, and stay tuned for our next one. We're going to dive into podcasting and video and how that can be part of your marketing strategy to round out the year and ramp up the year next year.